Let's start with a very interesting pro-revenge story from Also Not the Mama. HOA president is a bully. Well, his ego allows me to bully him. Someone? A lot of people suggested I cross-post this here. So this story is about a property I own, but rent out. This may sound strange, but I don't think I could afford to live there these days. It's become somewhat exclusive. I guess this could also go in pro-revenge. Maybe I should have put it here first. I've used dollars here because it's what most people reading this will relate to. This doesn't take place in the US, and I've given an approximate dollar value for local currency. This is going to be very long. Background. 1,000,000 years ago, my property was part of a large farm. I bought it about 30 years ago, long after the farm was broken up, but before there was any development near it. The piece of land I got was near the back entrance that joined into a dirt road that ran past. The more expensive plots were near the tarred road in the front. I originally bought a large chunk of the land intending to do some farming, but that never happened. About 20 years ago, some of the owners got organised. We'll call them the organised owners, OO, and had the area designated as a municipal suburb. The municipality agreed to put in tarred roads, water and electricity if a certain percentage of the properties were developed. A construction company, linked to the OO, went around contacting the owners who had land, but no buildings offering to build houses for us at a very, very reasonable price, contingent on them getting a certain minimum amount of people signing up. While this was happening, one of the OO approached me and offered to buy half of my property. I agreed, and the money I got for the sale, which was about 4x what I'd paid for the entire chunk of land 10 years prior, combined with a small loan from the bank, gave me what I needed to pay for a house to be built, and it was a fairly large and nice house too. I stayed in the house for a few years, and my mom moved in with me. I had decided to subdivide the property again and build her a house next to mine, but unfortunately, an undiagnosed tumor took her before the house could even be started. Well, it was diagnosed, but too late to do anything. Soon after she died, we moved out of the house and started renting it out. About a few weeks before we moved out the OO, I'd sold the land to started talking about starting an HOA. I wasn't interested and left soon after. About 2 years later, the neighbour OO contacted me. There were 2 roads entering the area these days. The original tarred road that was near where the farmhouse had been and was entered from a fairly busy main road, and my dirt road back entrance, which was now a tarred entrance from a wide but not very busy municipal road. The HOA was trying to get the old farm road blocked off to improve security and decrease through traffic, and wanted the road next to my property to be the main and only entrance to the HOA community. And they were pressuring me to join. I said no, and I was adamant, and eventually they accepted that, but told me they wanted to have a sign near the road welcoming people to the neighbourhood, and the only practical place to put it was on the edge of my property. They also wanted to build a little guard hut and have a security guard permanently monitoring who went in and came out, and they wanted to build his shed on my property. We came to an agreement whereby they would mow the lawn and pay the equivalent of about $35 per month in exchange for the land they needed. I was very happy with this arrangement since the property was fairly large, and it didn't really cost them anything since they already had a full-time gardening service servicing the HOA. This all happened over a decade ago. They eventually got the other main road blocked off, and the HOA is paying for Rent-A-Cop to be permanently stationed close to my property, as well as mowing my lawn and paying me enough money for takeaways for the family each month. I'm occasionally contacted by members of the HOA to get me to sign up, but I'm really not interested. My property has been rented to the same tenant for all these years, and everything there is going well for me. Until about 3 years ago, when someone scared the crap out of my tenant's young daughter by making strange noises and shooting a gun close to a bedroom window 3 or 4 times over about a month. This scared my tenant, and I guessed it scared the HOA because they and my tenant contacted me with a proposal. I joined the HOA, and they give me exclusions from the HOA rules, including exclusions from paying the monthly fees, and in addition, they will build a wall around the entire HOA neighborhood, including electric fencing and security cameras. They told me they had wanted to do this for a while but were unwilling to build the wall on property that was not in the HOA. I couldn't see the downside, and so agreed. The dishonest dealings. It took a little over a year to build the wall and get everything completed, which is quite fast. And then a month to the day after everything was done, my tenant got an HOA warning about his dogs barking. He told the HOA that while the property was in the HOA, it was exempt from the rules. The HOA told him that they had cancelled the exemptions and that he had 30 days to comply. He contacted me and I opened some mail I'd gotten from the HOA. I'd ignored it since I was supposed to be exempt from the rules and fees. Man, did I get a surprise. They had retroactively cancelled the exemptions and were claiming that I pay late fees going back over a year, that the easement agreement had been cancelled and that they were retroactively cancelling it a year back because the HOA contract allowed them to use small unused portions of HOA members' land for the common good for free, that I refund them the money they had paid for the easement over that period, that I owed them money for the garden service mowing the large lawn, and that I would be fined for each infraction my tenant failed to remedy. This started an expensive process involving lawyers and the court system that ended with a judge telling me that what the HOA had done was mostly legal. They had the right to revoke the exemptions, but that they had to give me 30 days' notice. As I was walking to my car, the neighbour OO, the one who bought half my land so many years ago, told me that I was stupid to have refused to join when the HOA started, as I could have been a founder member, whatever that means, and that next time I should be sure to understand the documents I sign before signing them. The malicious compliance. Neighbour OO was right, I should have read the contract better. Also, I was interested in what it meant to be a founding member. Spoiler, nothing. And so when I got home, I grabbed the HOA contract I'd signed, as well as all the other documentation they had provided me with, and started reading. I was determined to break every rule I could find a loophole to break. I didn't get past the first page, and then, while the street address of the property is used to identify it for all practical purposes, in the city records it has a unique property number that has to be used on legal records. When my mom moved in, I'd subdivided the remaining property but hadn't yet started building on it. And when I gave the HOA the easement all those years ago, it had been on the property I'd sliced off for my mom. And when the HOA set up the contract, they had simply used the property number from the easement. The next afternoon, the neighbour OO delivered, and had me sign for, 2 documents. One telling me that my exemptions would expire in 30 days, and one letting me know that the easement would no longer be required after 30 days. I think he was being a bit malicious here, because I lived about an hour away from the property and he drove out himself. The revenge. Exactly 30 days to the hour. After the HOA had given me the 30 days notice, I knocked on the neighbour OO's door, did I mention he was the president of the HOA, and had him sign for 2 documents. The first was that I planned to build a house on my HOA property, which confused him, and the second was notice that they had 30 days to remove from the property the guard shed, the parts of the electric boom that were on my property, as well as the sign. He tried to engage me, but I ignored him, climbed into my car, and drove off. Early the next morning, I got a call from the HOA lawyer who explained to me that their junk would be staying on my property since it was in an unused part of my land. I explained that I was building a house there, and that the land would not be unused anymore. I could hear the smirk as he told me that building a second house to be spiteful would not be accepted by the courts. I sure hope he could hear the smirk in my voice when I told him that the property in question did not have a house, and was, in fact, barely large enough for a house to be built and would not be large enough for any extraneous buildings. I then told him to go look up the property in question and call me back. I had sliced off just enough to be legal, which was just enough to build a small house. It took them just under 5 days to get back to me. Their lawyer told me that the terms of the easement meant that I could not cancel without their permission, so I emailed him a photo of the document they sent to me cancelling the easement. That afternoon, neighbour OO invited me to lunch, his treat, to discuss the problem. I said, no thanks. He extended the offer again 2 days later, and again I said, no thanks. Others of the original OO contacted me to try to talk. Some sounded aggressive, some sounded sympathetic. I said no thanks to each of them. Eventually, the lawyer phoned and asked if we could come to some sort of arrangement. I asked what he had in mind, and he told me that he was prepared to discuss exclusions in exchange for access to my property, so I said, no thanks, and please don't call me again. About 9 days before their 30 days was up, I got a call from a different lawyer. He said he wanted to negotiate a surrender. His words, not mine. I agreed to meet him at his office the next day. I'd already had documents drawn up, and the meeting was as simple as me giving him the documents and him reading them over. My new easement offers included everything offered by the old easement offer. I changed the line mow the lawn to get the property to HOA standards and keep it there, since it was now in the HOA. Would cost them about $500 per month instead of $35. This amount would increase with inflation. The previous contract didn't include that bit. When cancelled, for whatever reason, the HOA would have to pay me a cancellation fee of around $7,500. The contract automatically terminated 30 days after. Any disciplinary action was taken against me, my tenant, or the property. Any complaints were levied by the HOA against the property. Any legal action was taken against the property by anyone in the HOA. That lawyer who had offered to negotiate surrender would be allowed to mediate any disputes between us, at HOA's expense and that. The HOA would pay all my legal fees if any legal action was taken against me. I'd deliberately left some insane things in there so that I could appear to concede some points or be negotiated down when the HOA got indignant about the points I actually cared about. The lawyer didn't look happy. He said that my proposals sounded unfair, but that he'd have the HOA president look at them. I reminded him that in 8 days I'd be setting a group of men armed with sledgehammers and anger management issues loose on whatever of theirs was still on my property. That evening, I got an irate call from the HOA president. He told me he was never going to sign the new contract. I said, okay. He then told me I was charging too much per month and that it should be at the same rate as the previous contract. I pointed out that when I signed the previous contract, the area was under development, and there was at least one other road leading in and out, but that now there was only mine. And besides, mine was now developed with everything they needed. He told me that I was forcing them to sign a document they didn't want to sign. I told him that he was free to not sign it. He whined about everything he could think of, and then, eventually, told me I'd be hearing from his lawyer. The next morning, surrender lawyer called to ask if I'd be willing to come to their offices to sign the contract. I agreed. When I got there that afternoon, I learned that surrender lawyer was not a lawyer but a paralegal. He handed me the contract and asked me to sign it. He laughed when I told him I'd have to read through it first to make sure nothing was changed, and mumbled something that sounded like, "I'm sure you would." I read the contract. Nothing had been changed. Not a single thing. And the HOA president had signed it, with the surrender paralegal signing as witness. I looked at him and said, "Why did he sign this? It was stupid to sign it." And the paralegal looked at me and said, I started telling him that signing it would be a bad decision, but he told me I wasn't being paid to think or give legal advice and to shut up. So I shut up. I said, "Do you understand what he's signed here?" He looks at me and nods. He said, "I asked him if I should have one of the lawyers look at it before giving it to you, and he told me that we had already billed enough for this, and that he'd sign it and sue me after their easement was safe." This happened about 1.5 years ago. It took 6 months for the HOA to find out how screwed they were. They wanted to sue me, but their lawyers explained to them that there was no way to win. Even if the court sided with them, all they would get is the easement contract voided, and they did not think that the court would side with them. The lawyers were adamant about one thing. The HOA could not live with the HOA pays my legal fees if legal action was taken against me, since it didn't limit the people taking legal action against me to the HOA. As worded, the HOA would be forced to pay for my legal fees if anyone took legal action against me. They argued that the courts would probably not enforce that, since the context of the agreement was to do with the HOA. And I told them I was prepared to find out, since the HOA would definitely be the ones taking action against me if they challenged it. I eventually signed an addendum to the contract that said that the neighbor OO, HOA president, would personally pay all my legal fees unless he held no position at all in the HOA, and that the HOA would pay all legal fees if the HOA took legal action against me. He resigned from the HOA at the end of that meeting. I politely told him in front of everyone that he should not sign documents unless he understands what he's signing. He didn't look pleased. It came out during the mediation. You cannot imagine how happy the lawyers were that their paralegal was mediating, that without the ability to control access to the HOA neighborhood through the security boom, partially, on my property, the HOA had become a gated community a number of years back. The HOA would be in breach of their own articles and would be dissolved. I also learned, should have been obvious to me, that all the security cameras were wired and all terminate in the guardhouse, guard shed. So basically, it was my way or the end of the HOA. That first mediation was really quite funny. My paralegal looked more than a little glum as we assembled, and he called everyone to order. I suspected that he had been told to work against me, so I took the initiative. I reminded everyone there that I had agreed to let paralegal mediate, but that I had agreed to no arbitration at all. If I didn't feel like the proceedings were fair, I'd leave, and they could go ahead and sue. Paralegal brightened up, and things actually went quite well. I'm writing this after getting home from the latest mediation. I built a paddling pool for the neighborhood dogs, as in, I made it myself. I dug a hole, packed it with stone, and added a concrete finish. It was my first attempt, and if I say so myself, it looked, well, terrible. The HOA called for a mediation meeting, what they do now instead of taking official action. I've declined their mediation requests in the past, in which they told me, as nicely as they could, that the paddling pool was an eyesore right at the entrance of the HOA. I asked them to create a list of what needed to be fixed and how it needed to be fixed to give to me at the next meeting. The list was extensive. It basically required the pool to be rebuilt from scratch. I asked them if there was any way to reduce costs on the work they needed to get it up to HOA standards, and they assured me there was not. I thanked them, pulled out a copy of the agreement where they had agreed to get the property to HOA standards, which I'd highlighted, and handed it to them with the list. I told them the HOA usually preferred if these things were dealt with within 30 days. They started arguing until the mediator reminded them that they could not force me to comply without causing the easement to end. I should mention that their lawyers usually no longer attend these things. They said they would get it done. I also learned a lot about neighbor OO today. I found out that neighbor OO sold his property about 3 months back and is apparently leaving the country for Australia. I found out that the HOA had successfully sued him for a carload of money they had lost to his mismanagement as part of his vendetta against me. I also learned that he had a vendetta against me. I have no idea what I did to upset him. I'm not sure if I will screw with the HOA anymore. I already think I'm so close to breaking them, the only thing stopping them from cancelling the contract is the massive financial loss if they do. I guess a lot depends on how they treat me and my tenants going forward. Also, I do like the monthly payments though, so I'm motivated to play nice. TL, Dicta, HOA. President gets me to join the HOA under false pretenses that get upheld in court, then finds out that he's signed up, literally, the wrong property and has to resign after getting the HOA into an incredibly expensive situation that it cannot get out of. Thank you, everyone. When I posted this on malicious compliance, it was because I felt like I could fly and wanted to share. Now the adrenaline is gone, and I feel like I've been kicked by a donkey. I thought some people would like the story, but also thought it was too long for most. It seems I may have been very wrong. There are so many people commenting and sending messages that I cannot keep up. Thank you all so very much. OP inflicted a heavy revenge on the HOA. One mistake of the HOA, that is mistakenly signing the wrong property led them to be under the strict terms, which the HOA had no choice but to accept, and it financially crippled the HOA, and its president had to resign. The revenge was impressive. Such a fraudulent HOA deserved the same treatment. The next revenge story is from Bakadash Tari. Military revenge? Served hot. Back in my army days, I was once in command of a unit of about 80 soldiers in Hawaii. Dialogue sections are the gist of what was said, but it's been a minute so they're not exact. Names changed, etc. TLDR. Soldier wants out of the army. Commander agrees pending good behavior. Soldier fucks around and ends up in the brig before getting kicked out. Most of the soldiers in my command were great people, happy to do their jobs and take home a paycheck. Hard workers, creative, adaptable to unusual army conditions, and generally reliable. But there was one who was trouble from the start. Gentle reader, meet Private Wiggles. My first awareness of Wiggles came 2 or 3 days after I'd taken over command of the unit. We're prepping for a month-long training exercise to Thailand, and Platoon Sergeant Maggie tells me Wiggles might not be able to go as she'd just had an outpatient medical procedure. Departure is about a week away, and I have to validate the personnel roster to make sure we've got logistical support for everyone we're bringing. Transportation, food, lodging, etc. So I talk directly with Wiggles and ask if she's okay to travel and participate in the exercise. Wiggles says it's not a problem, she can handle it. We get to Thailand and set up camp on a Thai army base. 2 days in, and the medical section sends a runner to find me. Wiggles is at our medical clinic, tents with cots and surprisingly extensive medical supplies, laid out with extreme abdominal pain. I cruise over to the clinic tent, and the physician assistant, PA, on duty, tells me a couple things. Wiggles acknowledged recently having an abortion, the previously mentioned outpatient medical procedure, and the PA's examination and testing shows that Wiggles has the single worst case of pelvic inflammatory disease, PID, he's ever seen. Seriously, this Army PA who has seen all sorts of crazy shit from soldiers was emphatically impressed by how bad it was. Wiggles developed PID from failing to get treatment for sexually transmitted infections for a long time. As in, she's almost glowing from it. No judgment on the abortion, not everyone is ready for kids. And the STI-induced PID can be treated with high-dose antibiotics, which the PA has on hand. Not a problem, we've got this covered. Wiggles is released to Sergeant SGT Deb, her section sergeant, who will make sure Wiggles takes her antibiotics and keep an eye on her for any further issues. SGT Deb finds me and First Sergeant 1SG Bob about a day later and tells me 2 more things about Wiggles. She's refusing to take her antibiotics and she wants to get out of the army. I again talk with Wiggles. Me: so you want out of the army? You know you have a couple years left on your contract, right? Wiggles: I know, but I'm just done being a soldier and I want to be out of the army. Me: okay, I can make that happen. You don't want to be here, then I don't want you here either. But here's the deal. You got to play by the rules. I can get you out with an honorable discharge, and I'll start the paperwork as soon as we're back in Hawaii. But you need to take your antibiotics, do your job, and be where you're supposed to be. You do your part, and I'll do my part for you. Sound good? Wiggles: yep, I can do that. Spoiler alert, she couldn't do that. For the rest of the Thailand exercise, SGT Deb had to take control of Wiggles' meds and force her to take them, when she could actually find Wiggles, who consistently found someplace else to be. At one point in the next week or so, she accuses 1SG Bob of having sex with her, easily disproven as he doesn't have any STIs, and Wiggles has all of them. She was just trying to stir up trouble with wild accusations, I guess. We get back to Hawaii, and I start the process to get her out of the army because as much as she's been a handful of trouble in Thailand, I'm thinking it's still easier at this point to kick her to the curb than it is to keep her around and punish her before kicking her out. I was wrong. Even as I start to work on her discharge, she ramps up the stupidity. Here are a few examples. Wiggles gets caught drinking, only 19 years old. Wiggles and her husband lie to the on-base housing office and provide forged authorization documents to get into rent-free on-base housing that they didn't qualify for. Side note, Mr. Wiggles was no winner either. He was about to be dishonorably discharged from his infantry unit for selling drugs to other soldiers. Wiggles shows up at the infirmary to get treatment for facial bruising. Mr. Wiggles kicked her in the face, while wearing his combat boots, when Wiggles accused him of cheating on her. Wiggles refuses to show up for work, or any unit formation, and can't be found anywhere for days. Wiggles slashes all 4 tires on Mr. Wiggles' car, then attacks him with the knife when he confronts her. Military police are called, end up taking him in when Wiggles gives a sob story. But he's the one with defensive wounds on his hands, not her. One of my male sergeants uses my open door policy to visit me one day. Tells me he saw Wiggles stripping at one of the skankier gentlemen's clubs down in Honolulu the night before, and she had also convinced one of our other female soldiers to come along with her to do the same. Here's a weird one. I get a call from a temp agency asking me if it's okay for Wiggles to continue working through them as an administrative assistant for clients in town. Not uncommon for soldiers to have a second job. But with everything else she was up to at the time, this one just had me going, WTF? There's more, but you get the idea. At this point, Wiggles' actions are egregious enough that I can no longer just kick her out with an honourable discharge. I put her on notice that she's at risk for a court-martial. I thought that threat might keep her in line, but she just couldn't seem to stop herself from getting stupider and stupider. It's the old 80-20 problem. 80% of your time is spent dealing with the 20% of your folks who are troublemakers. At this point, I'm wasting a not insignificant amount of time dealing with Wiggles' issues almost daily. I had genuinely, and in good faith, offered her the easy path, but I guess she figured she'd try to burn the place down on the way out since she apparently thought she was getting what she wanted no matter what she did. I was reminded of what my old platoon sergeant used to say when I was coming up through the ranks. You want to get stupid? Go ahead, but I can get stupider. Cue the revenge. She's causing me daily headaches, so I'm going to bring the pain back to her. Honourable discharge paperwork is out the window, and I lean into the special court-martial process instead. My legal counsel tells me that Wiggles' activities are likely to get her a couple weeks confinement at most, maybe not even that. She may get a monetary fine, and she'll probably get an other than honourable OTH discharge, potential for a bad conduct discharge, which are worse. But while her actions have been not that good, they also are not that bad. I'm rational enough to understand that. I have a brief chat with Captain CPT Morgan, Wiggles' military defense attorney, about where I'm going with this case. During our chat, I try to be a gentleman and let him know that Wiggles is going to be trouble for him if he's not careful. He gives me a condescending, "This isn't my first rodeo, bucka. I'm a big boy and can take care of myself." Fair enough, I tried to warn you. Normally, a soldier getting a special court-martial for piddle shit might get confined to the barracks, restricted to their on-base quarters, or something similar for the duration of the process. It's not like she killed someone, right? However, my military legal counsel drops this little gem in my ear. He tells me Wiggles has met all 5 of the conditions, danger to others, flight risk, etc., required by military law, Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ, to warrant requesting confinement prior to her trial. He tells me, if you can remember these 5 conditions and elaborate on the details at our next pre-trial meeting with the military magistrate, you might be able to get her confined to the Navy brig at Fort Island until the trial. I'm a guy who likes to pay attention to sound legal advice, so I do, just as he says. A couple days later, we go in for the pre-trial meeting and I run down the list for the magistrate. Boom. Magistrate orders Wiggles to be confined in the brig through the trial. 1 SG Bob and Platoon Sergeant Maggie go to pick her up from her on-base housing. She won't open the door, but they know she's inside because they can clearly hear her and Mr. Wiggles banging away. This is important for later. The Wiggles finish up, she takes her time getting showered and dressed, and finally comes to the door when it pleases her. Off she goes to the brig. The pre-trial processes take up the next 4 weeks. During that time, I have to deal with CPT Morgan, the paralegals in his office, and various fun things to do with her pending court-martial. Other than that, it's blissfully peaceful. Wiggles chills in the brig for 4 weeks. Seriously chills. Every time I had to visit, it was freezing in there. I required to make weekly welfare visits to see if she's being mistreated, if she has any needs that aren't being met, etc. Seems weird, but as her commander, I'm still responsible to make sure the brig staff aren't mistreating my soldier. Other goings-on in this time period. Mr. Wiggles fraudulently applies for a car loan and gets a van in their names. Mr. Wiggles is dishonorably discharged and kicked off the island. Flies home to wherever the hell he originally enlisted from. CPT Morgan asks me to consider an OTH discharge and time served in lieu of taking things all the way to trial. I'm hot to get that pound of flesh from her, but my legal counsel advises me to avoid the court-martial and just kick out Wiggles with the OTH discharge. After all, he says, she's already been locked up for almost 3 weeks, so the magistrate will probably just give her time served and the OTH anyway. See my earlier comment about sound legal advice. My boss, Lieutenant Colonel, LTC, Ryan, thinks I'm too invested in the case, that I'm no longer objective. LTC Ryan insists on coming with me to the brig for the next welfare visit. This is 3 weeks into Wiggles's stay in those luxurious accommodations. Among other bullshit lines she throws at us, Wiggles tells us she needs to see the dentist about a filling that's giving her trouble, and Motrin just isn't working. At the end of the visit, LTC Ryan tells the guards about Wiggles's filling, asks if they can give her anything stronger than Motrin, then instructs them to follow up with the dentist. Guard actually laughs out loud at this and says, "No, sir, Motrin is the best we can do in the brig." And that other thing? For the last 2 weeks, she's been telling anyone with ears that she wants to try getting her wisdom teeth pulled before she's kicked out. She doesn't have a problem with any fillings. It was hilarious to watch LTC Ryan's face go from obvious concern for Wiggles' well-being to outright fury, and the next words out of his mouth were, "That bitch lied to me." I make arrangements with CPT Morgan to accept his request for time served and oath in lieu of court-martial. Sometime later that week, I get a call from the brig. Wiggles is pregnant. Remember the scene at her house 4 weeks prior? And they can't keep her confined anymore because of it. She has to be released back to her unit until the court-martial, or other actions, are complete. CPT Morgan stakes his reputation on Wiggles being a good girl until we can send her back home to Carolina. He'll come to regret that, and he can't say, "I didn't warn him." We get Wiggles back from her 4-week all-inclusive stay in the brig. I've accepted Captain Morgan's request to avoid the court-martial, and I confine Wiggles to the barracks under supervision for the 9 days she has left until her flight to Carolina. Immediately, we have another shit show. Wiggles is smoking in the barracks. Not a big deal that she's smoking, it's just not allowed inside barracks rooms. Wiggles is caught with a bottle of hypnotic liquor in her barracks room. She's still only 19. Wiggles slips out of the barracks and runs off for a day when her platoon sergeant gets distracted from supervising her. 1SG Bob and Lieutenant LT. Ricky, the executive officer, go to collect Wiggles's belongings from her on base housing so we can box it up and ship it to her home. And they find that Mr. Wiggles has left behind a bunch of stuff he stole from other soldiers, body armor, military equipment, and some ammunition, smoke grenades, and explosives that he stole during trips to the range. All lined up right inside the front door where it's impossible to miss. They call me, asking what to do. Me. Just collect it all. Return the equipment to the central issue facility and dump the ammo and explosives in the nearest amnesty box. Mr. Wiggles obviously meant for Wiggles to take the fall for having it. Husband of the year. If we take that bait, Wiggles will be here forever. I don't want that. Do you? LT Ricky. Nope, I don't want that either. It'll be like it never happened. In light of all this drama, I bring Wiggles into my office to remind her of her agreement to be a good girl till she leaves the island, with LT Ricky as a witness in the office to protect my ass. Me, Wiggles, You're in violation of your release agreement from the brig. You've been sneaking out of the barracks, you've been smoking and drinking. Wiggles, she cuts me off. Yeah, and doing all kind of drugs too. Heavy sarcasm voice. Me. Be that as it may, I'm giving you fair warning that you're at risk of losing the deal I made with CPT Morgan. You're pregnant again. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but most damage to a fetus from alcohol come in the first few weeks after conception. I don't know if you're planning to keep this one or not, but at the rate you're going, this baby's going to be born dumber than you. Wiggles, gaping like a damn fish. Wiggles then bolts from my office and runs down to LTC Ryan's office at the other end of the building to squeal on me for insulting her, LT Ricky hot on her heels. She tries to rush into LTC Ryan's office, but LT Ricky gets in first and fills him in. LT Ricky tells me later how it went down. Wiggles is yelling about how I called her stupid. Strangely vanilla thing to focus on considering everything she's done, but you do you. And that she's being mistreated. LTC Ryan yells at his admin to get CPT Morgan on the phone, now. He reams CPT Morgan for his client's jackassery, tells him to fucking fix this, and makes various threats to CPT Morgan's career. About a half hour later, I get a call from CPT Morgan. CPT Morgan. Bucker, Bucker, Bucker. Yes, he did that whole patronizing bullshit. I can't believe the words I'm hearing from Wiggles. I'm shocked, just shocked, that you would use language like that and call her names. Side note, my mom is an attorney, and I grew up with tales from the courthouse about lawyers using exactly this sort of hyperbole. Your Honor, I'm shocked, appalled, and dismayed that opposing counsel would attempt to paint my client in such a light. It's the kind of bullshit they said when they didn't have a good argument. So as soon as I hear the word shocked, I know I own him, and immediately cut in. Me? And I bet you're appalled and dismayed too. CPT Morgan, stumbling and sounding slightly confused. Well, yes, of course I am. You can't talk to soldiers like that. I know of a lieutenant colonel, a commander, who called one of her soldiers stupid, and she's no longer in command now. Me? I didn't call her stupid. I informed her of basic biological facts. Not my problem if she takes the news poorly, and arguably, she's not all that smart. Anyway, you called me, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't to warn me about what I said to Wiggles, so what do you want? CPT Morgan. What will it take to prevent you from kicking back our deal? Apparently, LTC Ryan had cinched his asshole up good and tight. Me. You could get her on a plane tomorrow. CPT Morgan. How about if I get her out of here by Friday? It was Wednesday, and she was due to fly out the following Wednesday. Me. I don't think you can manage that, but good on you if you do. To his credit, CPT Morgan gets Wiggles a flight for Sunday, 3 days early. I print up official orders appointing LT Ricky as a military escort specifically for her. LT Ricky drives her to the airport, and the airline desk agent calls me to verify his status when they get to the check-in counter. They give him a special pass to get through security with her. He stays with her at the gate to make sure she gets on, and stays on the plane, then stays at the gate until the plane is in the air. Some boogers are hard to flick. We wanted to make damn sure this one landed someplace else. About a month later, I get a call from the military police about a derelict van in the parking lot with all 4 tires slashed. Guess who that belonged to? It's really kind of sad when I look back on it. I had 2 other soldiers come to me at different points asking to get out of the army ahead of their contracts. One just didn't want to be in the army anymore. The other did want to stay in the army but had family issues that would be a lot easier to deal with as a civilian. They played by the rules, and I got both of them out with honorable discharges and all the benefits. They even qualified for unemployment. Too easy. Wiggles could have had the same treatment. I told her exactly what I could do for her, then had to shift gears and told her exactly what I was going to do to her. Then I did it. I could have been her best friend on her way out the door, but instead, I ended up owning her and her dumbass defense attorney. She screwed herself out of transition benefits and access to the VA and picked up a lifelong black mark for employment, all because she couldn't play nice for a few weeks. She decided she wanted to play fuck around games, and we all know what happens next. The revenge is a masterclass in patience and strategy. The commander, OP, offered Private Wiggles an easy exit, but when she repeatedly acted out, he turned the tables. By leveraging military protocols, he had her confined to the brig and ensured she left with a damaging other than honourable discharge. The punishment fit the offence perfectly, making this a satisfying tale of karma for a soldier who couldn't follow the rules. Always remember, military is all about discipline, war, and battles are the second things. The next story is from Reaper0221. It is a really bad idea to make a government employee angry. This one is a double government employee event, and what you should know is if you get the attention of a government employee and make them angry, they will make your life a living hell. Sorry, this is a long one. The setup is that I was working for a local county government in the permitting department that handled drainage and floodplain enforcement. I received a complaint from a homeowner, nice guy, lived next door to a house that was part of an incorporated village. Not nice guy. Nice guy lived in an unincorporated portion of the county, and hence the call to me as an agent of the county. I drove out to the site and to investigate and discovered some interesting facts. The permitting agent for the village allowed the incorporated homeowner to fill his lot, affecting the drainage, which caused the unincorporated lot to flood every time there was anything more than light rain. Nice guy indicated that there was some tension between him and not nice guy, and part of the issue was that nice guy and his partner were a gay couple. This ran up a red flag for me, but in trying to be impartial, I took the information and some photos for the file and indicated that I would contact the village to find a resolution. I wrote a letter and then called the village inspector, Jackwagon, to discuss. I was told by Jackwagon that the village could do as it pleased, and that I could do nothing to stop not nice guy from doing as they pleased, as it was approved by the village. There was then a comment about those type of people, the gay couple, making complaints just to cause trouble. I was now on the case, and it was time to make sure everything done on the incorporated lot was 100% legal. At this point, the game certainly was now on, because if there is one thing that grinds my gears, it is bullying. I went back out and spoke to nice guy to let them know what I was up to, and also that I was not going to let this slide. I then started investigating the elevations on the two lots and what fill had been placed on the incorporated lot. The not nice guy came out and started getting belligerent about my presence and ongoing investigation. He incorrectly stated that I did not have jurisdiction over his lot and that he would be calling the police. I patiently listened and then pulled out my two-way radio and requested that the home base dispatch both a village and a county police unit to the location. I then indicated that since there was a regulatory floodplain on his lot, I did in fact have jurisdiction, and that I would be exercising my right to determine the impact of his fill activities upon that floodplain. Both of the police units showed up, and I let them know what was going on. They were both appropriately agitated to have to waste their time and let not nice guy know that I was within, in my authority, to proceed with the investigation. A little while later, while I was measuring things, Jackwagon showed up. He stated berating me about harassing the village resident and threatening calling my boss and filing a complaint and so forth. I invited him to do so, quoting which parts of the code he should indicate I was violating. I was using marking paint to show the limits of the floodplain for the photos for the file. And what do you know, Jackwagon's shoe got painted when he tried to stop me? Obviously, he was even more angry, as was the homeowner, due to very bright orange paint in the grass in his yard. I pointed out I had done the same on the neighbouring lots, but they just kept complaining. It was actually marking chalk that comes off pretty easily. Interestingly, I found two really wrong things on Not Nice Guy's lot. 1, there was fill placed in the floodplain, and 2, a garden shed was built on the fill and partially within the floodplain. Both are a big no-no and are actually against federal law. So the course of action had 2 parts. 1, make the incorporated homeowner remove the fill and shed from the floodplain, and 2, Let nice guy place fill in their lot outside of the floodplain to counteract the fill remaining in not nice guy's lot outside of the floodplain. I also told nice guy it would be a good idea to run a field tile on their side to drain the water that would inevitably pond up between the two lots when it rained. Predictably, not nice guy and Jackwagon got super angry when I sent the letter out that there were violations that either had to be corrected, remove fill and shed, or apply for a revision of the floodplain with the Army Corps of Engineers. Good luck with that. This then led to a meeting at the county office with not nice guy, Jackwagon, my supervisor, and myself. Quickly, things went to 11, and there was yelling by Jackwagon about abuse of power, etc. The department head came into the conference room and told them both they were wrong and that they should leave peacefully and comply or face the consequences, fines. The best part was that not nice guy had to apply for a permit, and guess who was the one to review and approve it? That's right, yours truly. Now, I was following the letter of the law, but you have to know that poor government workers are underpaid and overworked. Strangely, the permit for nice guy was almost immediately approved, while not nice guy had to have a very thorough review to ensure it was correct. You could make a case I was abusing my power, but I can assure you that the timing for their review was well within acceptable limits. Also, how could I be held to account that they misfiled 3 times before they finally got it right? Generally, if you behaved like a civil human and came to the office, we would help you get things done properly so the permit would go through first time, but not nice guy decided he could do it all in his own, so it took him 3 tries. Had he come to the office, I would have given him the same service as others, but he decided to take the hard route, and therefore I didn't give a single inch when it came to the submission being perfectly correct. Ultimately, the situation was resolved, but it took a lot more effort than it should have. Moral of the story: don't be an entitled homophobic asshole. The revenge was served through meticulous adherence to legal procedures, ensuring that the entitled homophobic neighbour faced consequences for violating floodplain regulations. OP, the county employee, exposed the illegal fill and construction, forcing the homeowner to correct his actions. It's a satisfying tale of bureaucratic karma. Bye-bye for today. Let's see you tomorrow.